Dear friends, ladies and gentlemen, all peoples have their struggle for independence, but not all struggles have the same features. Just as all human acts differ from each other, so all national uprisings are different, and each is evaluated according to the period in history during which it takes place, the favorable or forbidding climate in which it develops, the enemy it has to face, and the length of time during which the people have lived under foreign domination. In the opinion of the entire reasoning world of the 18th century, the 25th of March, 1821, marked a foolish moment in Greek history. So the rules of logic seemed to dictate, and such was the first reception the events of that day received. And yet, like all rules, this one had its exception too. And just as all struggles are not similar, so the interest manifested in them by outsiders is not always the same. These interests must be judged and evaluated according to the hour which gave them birth and according to the moral values and the origins which lie behind them. It is from this point of view that the interest of the United States possesses all the elements of sincerity. It was a universal interest, not localized in the governmental circles alone or only among isolated individuals in diplomatic circles. It was diffused everywhere, from the highest officials of the land, from Congress, the clergy, and the university intellects down to the youngest schoolboy and the laborer who went to church every Sunday to pray. It was an interest born of the conscience for liberty, possessed by the lowest citizen of this land. The entire prosperity of the land is based on this principle. That is why every struggle for freedom receives immediate response from the American people. Every struggle for the establishment of respect towards the individual automatically becomes a struggle of the American people. Thus, American interest in a struggling people is in complete harmony with the fundamental principles of the American way and the American way of life. If anyone had told an American citizen of that period, in the 18th century, that it was possible for the United States to enter the Holy Alliance, she or he would have been deeply insulted. For how could a people which was founded upon a love of freedom and respect for individual person adhere to treaties which denied to other peoples the right to fight for their own liberty? And how could an American admit that a nation which belonged to the Holy Alliance would honestly and without hypocrisy be interested in encouraging so great and beautiful a struggle for freedom as the Greek Revolution of 1821? When we speak of America's interest in the Greek War for Independence, we refer to something that was the natural outcome of the fundamental principles, the mentality, the policies which guided the United States. On the other hand, the Greek fighters had no exact understanding of what this land was, but following the unerring path of intuition, they sensed that in the American people, they had a true friend and brother who was in a position to respect both the significance and the quality of the Greek struggle for independence. Kolokotronis admits this. It is proclaimed by Mavrokordatos, by the entire Messenian Senate at Kalamata, by Ipitis, by Pikolos, by Ypsilantis, and by Korais. The ocean that separated these two peoples was not broad enough to prevent the spirit of the Greeks and the Americans from being united in close fraternal bonds of understanding. The documents that we are going to present today disclose the extent of America's support and aid to the Greek people, and they bring to light the sources of American interest in the present Greek struggle against another type of imperialism. These documents we are presenting do not constitute an epoch-making discovery, but we hope that they will serve to strengthen weakened memories by reminding the quality and value of American interest in Greece and an encouragement to others better equipped than us to extend research into this field. To the American citizen, Greece is more than a spot on the map or a racial and ethnic entity. She is an idea and a symbol. Speaking at Princeton University in reference to American assistance to Greece, Professor Edward Capps, classicist and formerly an American minister to Greece, said that no matter what assistance and aid America gave to Greece, no matter what America did for her, no one could ever repay Greece for the great services she had performed for humankind. He was not referring exclusively to the incomparable achievement of classical Greece, but also to her great struggle for independence, a struggle which stands out in history like a shining example to all peoples. Anyone who has cast even a cursory glance at the history of the world during the last 3,000 years must have been arrested more than once by the trials of the Greek people. Without engaging in too much research or expending too much effort, he must have been able to see how often Greece has been the target of the mightiest imperialists. And he must have seen that somehow, using a different means each time, she had withstood them all without yielding. Xerxes' campaign, the pontoon bridge across the Hellespont, the Persian wars which were loosed against Greece, these are among the clearest and most typical imperialistic phenomena the world has ever known. And yet, the Greeks of that period withstood those attacks adamantly. And even though Greece was divided into competing cities, though she was plagued by the hypertrophied monstrosities of individual egoism which constitute the darker side of democracy, she was able to stand on her feet. The liberal conscience of the citizen, the free individual citizen won over the mob citizen, the totalitarian mass. Mind won over matter. Quality won over quantity. Friends, ladies and gentlemen, the texts we are presenting today are evidence of the tremendous moral support America extended to Greece during the latter's war for independence, evidence which also testifies to the moral sources of her great interest in Greece's struggle today against expansionism of a different despot. Kalamata, the 25th of May, 1821. To the citizens of the United States of America, having formed the resolution to live or die for freedom, we are drawn toward you by a just sympathy, since it is in your land that liberty has fixed her abode, and by you that she is prized as by our fathers. Hence, in invoking her name, we invoke yours at the same time, trusting that in imitating you, we shall imitate our ancestors and be thought worthy of them if we succeed in resembling you. Though separated from you by mighty oceans, your character brings you near us. We esteem you nearer than the nations on our frontiers, and we possess in you friends, fellow citizens, and brethren, because you are just, humane, and generous. Just because you are free, generous and liberal because Christian. Your liberty is not propped on the slavery of other nations, nor your prosperity on their calamities and sufferings. But on the contrary, free and prosperous yourselves, you are desirous that all men should share the same blessings, that all should enjoy those rights to which all are by nature equally entitled. It is you who first proclaimed these rights. It is you who have been the first again to recognize them in rendering the rank of men to the Africans degraded to the level of brutes. It is by your example that Europe has abolished the shameful and cruel trade in human flesh. From you that she receives lessons of justice and learns to renounce her absurd and sanguinary customs. This glory, Americans, is yours alone, and raises you above all the nations which have gained the name for liberty and laws. It is for you, citizens of America, to crown this glory in aiding us to purge Greece from the barbarians who for 400 years have polluted the soil. It is surely worthy of you to repay the obligations of the civilized nations and to banish ignorance and barbarism from the country of freedom and the arts. You will not assuredly imitate the culpable indifference, or rather the long ingratitude of some of the Europeans, No, the fellow citizens of Penn, of Washington, and of Franklin will not refuse their aid to the descendants of Phocion and Thrasybulus and Aratos and of Philomenos. You have already shown them esteem and confidence in sending your children to their schools. You know with what pleasure they were welcomed, and the steady kindness and attentions which they received. If such has been their conduct when enslaved, what friendship and zeal will they not manifest to you, when through your aid they shall have broken their chains? Greece will then furnish you advantages, which you can in vain seek from her ignorant and cruel tyrants. And in the bands of gratitude and fraternity will forever unite the Greeks and the Americans. Our interests are of a nature more and more to cement an alliance founded on freedom and virtue. At Kalamata, May 25th, 1821, signed the Messenian Senate at Kalamata, Peter Mavromichalis, Commander-in-Chief.
Extracts from James Monroe's Annual Message to Congress, December 2nd, 1823. 18th Congress, First Session, same message in which Monroe Doctrine was enunciated. Our policy in regard to Europe, which was adopted at the early stage of the wars, which have so long agitated that quarter of the globe, nevertheless remains the same, which is not to interfere in the internal concerns of any of its powers, to consider the government de facto as the legitimate government for us, to cultivate friendly relations with it, and to preserve those relations by a frank, firm, and manly policy, meeting in all instances the claims of every power, submitting to injuries from none. A strong hope has long been entertained, founded on the heroic struggle of the Greeks, that they would succeed in their contest, and resume their equal station among the nations of the earth. It is believed that the whole civilized world takes a deep interest in their welfare. Although no power has declared it in their favor, yet none, according to our information, has taken part against them. Their cause and their name have protected them from dangers which might ere this have overwhelmed any other people. The ordinary calculations of interest and of acquisition, with a view to aggrandizement, which mingle so much in the transactions of nations, seem to have no effect in regard to them. From the facts which have come to our knowledge, there is good cause to believe that their enemy has forever lost all dominion over them. That Greece will become again an independent nation, that she may obtain that rank, is the object of our most ardent wishes. The citizens of the state of New York appeal to Congress. Communicated to the House of Representatives, December 29th, 1823, sympathy for the Greeks. To the Congress of the United States, the memorial of the committee appointed at a numerous and respectable meeting of the citizens of New York assembled to take into consideration the situation of the Greeks respectively showeth, that the citizens who they represent have in common with their fellow citizens throughout the United States, witness with lively sensibility the heroic efforts of the Greeks to rescue themselves from Turkish bondage. It appeared to them that the Greek cause was not only entitled to the good wishes of this country, but, as far as might be done consistently with the views of government, to every possible assistance. In the opinion of the meeting, the independence of the Greek nation was a subject of the highest concern to the interests of the human race, and recommended itself to the approbation of every civilized people by the most powerful considerations that could possibly be addressed either to the judgment or to the sympathy of mankind. Your memorialists would deem it improper on this occasion to enlarge on this subject, or to do more than merely allude to the consideration of the barbarous dominion of the Turks, equally fatal to liberty, learning, and taste, and under which the Greeks have been most cruelly oppressed for ages, to the spirit of the Mohammedan superstition, presenting an insurmountable obstacle to the progress of civilization, to the ingenious, enterprising, free and commercial character of the Greeks, to their language, their literature, their religion, and their eventful history, exciting the deepest interest in their favor, and endearing them to the Christian world by recollections of their past sufferings and of their ancient glory. And your memorials will ever pray. Marinus Willett, M. Clarkson, Lind Catlin, Jano P. Roman, Isaac Lawrence, Henry Rutgers, Henry D. Sewell, Stephen Allen, Henry Wheaton, Felix Pascalis, J. Morton, Hiram Ketchum, Alexer Emlod, John Pintard, Cadwallader D. Colden, J. G. Swift, Charles King, J. R. Hurd, W. M. Johnson, Robert McQueen, Geo Demarest, R. Sedgwick, Joseph Ogden Hoffman, John Goodhue, John G. Coaster, Thomas H. Mary, Nathaniel F. Moore, Philip Hone, William Paulding Jr., J. No Trumbull, William Bayard, William Johnson, Samuel Boyd, James Kent, S. Jones, Richard Varick, Russell H. Nevins. Resolution passed by citizens of Poughkeepsie, January 1st, 1824. At a meeting of the citizens of Poughkeepsie held at the hotel to take into consideration the propriety of aiding the suffering Greeks pursuant to public notice on the first day of January 1824. General James Tallmaid was called to the chair, and the Reverend Cornelius C. Cuyler was appointed secretary. Whereupon it was resolved that a committee of 5 be appointed to prepare and report to this meeting resolutions expressive of the sense of this meeting in relation to the Greek cause. Whereupon it was ordered that Ebenezer Nye, Stephen Cleveland, Theodore Allen, Major Bailey, and Albert Cox composed said committee. The committee reported the following resolutions, which after a short and eloquent address by the Reverend C.C. Cuyler on the objects of the meeting were unanimously adopted. Resolved, that the Greek nation ought of right to be free and independent, and that the people of the United States preeminently enjoying those blessings ought not to look with indifference at their sufferings. Resolved, that we view with a lively interest the contest now carried on by the Greek nation against a barbarous enemy to obtain their independence, and that it is the duty of every free man living under a free government to aid them in the important struggle. Resolved, that it is right, just, and proper to aid our Christian brethren of Greece against the cruel and unrelenting Muslims, and that every one who values the Christian religion owes it to himself and the great head of the Christian church to aid in the pious cause. Resolved, that the ministers of the gospel and the various religious societies in the country of Dutches be and they are hereby requested to assemble their several congregations and solicit from the contributions in aid of the Greek nation. Resolved, unanimously, that the thanks of this meeting be given to the Honorable Daniel Webster, Member of Congress from Massachusetts, for the high and honorable stand he has taken in favor of the Greek nation, and that the chairman and secretary of this meeting transmit to him a copy of these resolutions. Resolved, that a committee consisting of 9 persons with power to add to their number be appointed to carry into effect the foregoing resolutions, which committee are requested to publish an address to the inhabitants of Dutches in aid of the Greek nation. Whereupon the chairman by order of the meeting appointed Ebenezer Nye, Stephen Cleveland, Nathaniel P. Tallmaid, Major Bailey, Abraham G. Storm, Albert Cox, Jacob Van Ness, John Brush, and John Nelson to compose said committee. Resolved, that the proceedings of this meeting be published in the newspapers printed in this village. Signed, James Tallmaid, Chairman, CASC Cuyler, Secretary. The citizens of the city of Boston appealed to Congress, communicated to the House of Representatives. January 5th, 1824, Sympathy for the Greeks, Memorial. To the Honorable, the Senate and House of Representatives of the United States in Congress assembled. The undersigned, a committee appointed for this purpose by a large number of the citizens of Boston and its vicinity, convened by public notification on the 19th instant, beg leave most respectfully to represent. That they feel a deep interest in the political situation of the people of Greece, and rejoice in the information recently communicated by the Chief Magistrate of the United States that there is good reason to believe Greece will become again an independent nation. That the contest of an oppressed and enslaved people for the invaluable blessings of self-government and of Christian people for the enjoyment of religious liberty has a claim to the best wishes of this nation, for its eventual success and to whatever aid and encouragement consistently with the primary duty of self-preservation it may have the ability to afford. No one has duly reflected upon the consequences which have resulted from our own successful struggle in the cause of civil liberty, not as respects the interests of our nation only, but as it has affected also the condition of the whole civilized world. Can hesitate to admit that the question of the erection of a new independent Christian state is the most momentous that can occur in the program of human affairs, and especially deserving the attention of the representatives of free people. Centuries whose annals are filled with the common succession of wars and conquests may pass away, without being attended with any important result to the great cause of civilization and humanity. But the emancipation from a barbarous despotism of a gallant and enterprising and intelligent people must be followed by the most propitious consequences and cannot fail to add to the security of all free governments by increasing the number of those who are devoted to their common defense. The extermination of the Turkish despotism of the coasts and islands of the Mediterranean Sea has justly been regarded as a more worthy object of concert and coalition among civilized powers than any which ever engaged their united attention. The existence of that despotism has reduced to a state of desolation several of the most fertile countries of the globe and annihilated that commerce that might otherwise have been maintained. It has been attended with the grossest insults and outrages on the dignity of states and the liberty of their citizens. The maintaining of a powerful marine force, expensive consular establishments, disgraceful tribute, slavery, and war has successfully been among the evils to which this lawless domination has subjected the civilized world, and from which our own country has not been exempted. It is quite obvious that the erection of a new free state in the Mediterranean, possessing not only the coast of southern Greece, but the islands, particularly of Candia and Cyprus, would form a powerful check upon the barbarous dependencies of the port in those seas, and give facility to that commercial enterprise which now finds its way only to one port of European or Asiatic Turkey. Your memorialists would not presume to make any suggestion as to the course which it may become the American government to pursue at this interesting crisis. They feel in common with their fellow citizens generally that just weight and obligation of that policy which hitherto has prohibited an interference with the internal concerns of any of the powers of Europe, and content themselves, therefore, with expressing their assurance that if the peculiar and unprecedented condition of the Greeks should, in the opinion of the government of the United States, form a case of exception to that rule of policy, the measures which may be adopted shall receive their cordial support. But your memorialists, at any rate, cannot refrain from the expression of their earnest wish that the indignation and abhorrence which they are satisfied is universal throughout the United States, at the mode in which the Turkish government is carrying on the war against Greece, should be distinctly avowed in the face of the world, and that other civilized and Christian nations should be invited to join in a solemn remonstrance against such barbarous and inhuman depravity. The sale of 40,000 Christian women and children, after the massacre of their husbands and fathers, in open market, in the presence of Christian Europe, and without one word of remonstrance from the surrounding nations, is a circumstance discreditable to the age of which we live. If older and nearer nations are silent on such a subject, there is a greater reason and the more honor in giving utterance to the feelings which are excited on this side of the Atlantic, and of endeavoring to obtain the interference and combining the sentiment of all civilized nations to put an end to such horrible scenes. The just indignation of the world has recently been manifested by a simultaneous effort to humble and restrain the barbaric powers, every year has witnessed some new exertions among Christian nations to abolish the horrible traffic in African slaves. An amelioration of the ancient laws of war with regard to private property has recently been propounded as subject worthy the consideration of the nations, and yet no remonstrance has been made in behalf of Christian brotherhood and suffering humanity. Your memorials do therefore most earnestly commend to the constitutional representatives of the American people an attentive consideration of the foregoing interests and important subjects, all which is most respectfully submitted, etc. Thomas L. Winthorpe, Henry D. Orne, Edward Everett, H.A.S. Dearborn, Samuel D. Harris, S. Adams Wells, Samuel F. Jarvis, George Blake, F.C. Warren, Warren Dutton, James T. Austin. Acts passed at the first session of the 32nd General Assembly for the Commonwealth of Kentucky, begun and read in the town of Frankfort on Monday, the 3rd day of November, 1823. Resolutions approbatory of the course of the President of the United States in relation to the struggle of the Greeks and South Americans for freedom, and in relation to the administration of the general government. Approved January 7th, 1824. Resolved by the Legislature of Kentucky that the sentiments expressed by the President of the United States at the opening of Congress in his message to that body in relation to the struggle by the Greeks for the right of self-government, and particularly the wish which we express that the devotion of that people to the cause of freedom may be crowned with ultimate success. That Greece, once the admiration of the world, the theme of universal eulogy, ever interesting to literature and science, to the politician and patriot, may achieve her emancipation, burst the shackles of the crescent, and emerging from the gloom of despotism, shine refulgent with the splendors of her pristine freedom, must be the fervent hope of each votary of liberty, and is the enthusiastic prayer of Kentucky. Extracts from Presidential Message, 18th Congress, 2nd Session, December 7th, 1824, James Monroe, President. In turning our attention to the condition of the civilized world, in which the United States have taken a deep interest, it is gratifying to see how large a portion of it is blessed with peace. The only wars which now exist within that limit are those between Turkey and Greece in Europe, and between Spain and the new governments, our neighbors in this hemisphere. In both those wars, the cause of independence, of liberty and humanity continues to prevail. The success of Greece, when the relative population of the contending parties is considered, commands our admiration and applause, and that it has had a similar effect with the neighboring powers is obvious. The feeling of the whole civilized world is excited, in a high degree, in their favor. May we not hope these sentiments winning in the hearts of their respective governments may lead to a more decisive result? That they may produce an accord among them to replace Greece on the ground which she formerly held, and to which her heroic exertions at this day so eminently entitle her? From John Quincy Adams, Presidential Message, 20th Congress, First Session, December 4th, 1827. From the interest taken by the sovereign, the Emperor Nicholas of Russia, in behalf of the suffering Greeks, and from the spirit with which others of the great European powers are co-operating with him, the friends of freedom and humanity may indulge the hope that they will obtain relief from the most unequal of conflicts, which they have so long and so gallantly sustained, that they will enjoy the blessing of self-government, which by their sufferings in the cause of liberty they have richly earned, and that their independence will be secured by those liberal institutions of which their country furnished the earliest examples in the history of mankind, and which have consecrated to immortal remembrance the very soil for which they are now again profusely pouring forth their blood. The sympathies which the people and the government of the United States have so warmly indulged with their cause have been acknowledged by their government. In a letter of thanks, which I have received from the illustrious President, a translation of which is now communicated to Congress, the representatives of the nation to whom this tribute of gratitude was intended to be paid, and to whom it was justly due.
Correspondence from James Monroe's annual message to Congress, 17th Congress, Session 2, Monday, December 2nd, 1822. Europe is still unsettled, and although the war-long menace between Russia and Turkey has not broken out, there is no certainty that the differences between those powers will be amicably adjusted. It is impossible to look to the oppressions of the country respecting which those differences arose without being deeply affected. The mention of Greece fills the mind with the most exalted sentiments and arouses in our bosoms the best feelings of which our nature is susceptible. Superior skill and refinement in the arts, heroic gallantry in action, disinterested patriotism, enthusiastic zeal, and devotion in favor of public liberty are associated with our recollection of ancient Greece. That such a country should have been overwhelmed, so long hidden, as it were, from the world under a gloomy despotism, has been a cause of unceasing and deep regret to generous minds for ages past. It was natural, therefore, that the reappearance of these people in their original character, contending in favor of their liberties, should produce that great excitement and sympathy in their favor, which have been so signally displayed throughout the United States. A strong hope is entertained that these people will receive their independence and resume their equal station among the nations of the earth. Votes and proceedings of the Senate of the State of Maryland. December session 1823, Tuesday, December 16th, 1823. Mr. Winder submitted the following preamble and resolutions. The Senate and House of Delegates of the General Assembly of Maryland contemplate with great satisfaction the state of the country and government, as exhibited in the full and luminous message of the President to the present Congress. But whilst we feel a lively sense of gratitude in looking at the rapidly improving and happy condition of our country, and a just pride in contemplating the high station which the wisdom of the government and the enterprise and patriotism of the people have given to our country in the estimation of the world, yet we entirely reciprocate the sentiment that there never was a period since the establishment of our revolution when, regarding the condition of the civilized world and its bearing on us, there was greater necessity for devotion in the public servants to their respective duties, or of virtue, patriotism, and union among the people. A confederacy of modern monarchs of Europe has existed for some years past, which avowed purposes of hostility against the system of representative government, not as a mere speculative proposition, but as a practical conduct, and which has already been carried into action in several recent instances in Europe, and in the last of them, under such circumstances, as manifests a fixed and settled purpose to deny to the people any or participation in government, except so far as their hereditary sovereigns may of their own mere will and pleasure choose to permit. The people of the United States, while they appreciate the wise and salutary maxim of their government of keeping aloof from the political agitations of Europe, have nevertheless been unable to hear the avowed principles of this tremendous conspiracy against the liberties of mankind without strong and indignant feelings, and have been awakened to an apprehension that their own happy political system, used as it is by these monarchs with a secret but ill-disguised enmity, as the practical and animating example to the rest of mankind of the happiness of a representative government, may, when the opportunity occurs, be considered by them as a necessary victim to ensure the triumph of their project of universal despotism. Under these circumstances, the Senate and House of Delegates of the General Assembly of Maryland perceive with lively sensibility that there is just ground to believe that this Confederacy already contemplates to extend the practical application of their principles beyond the boundaries of Europe, and meditate an attempt to reduce our sister republics in America from their present independent condition to their former state of subjection to their faithless tyrant, thus distinctly admonishing the people of the United States that their local position is no security against the application of a principle which its terms embraces them. We cannot, therefore, but view any attempt on these republics who have declared their independence and maintained it, and whose independence the United States have on great consideration and on just principles acknowledged as dangerous to our peace and safety, and as manifestation of an unfriendly disposition toward the United States. Therefore, resolved that we highly approve the frank and candid declaration on this subject contained in the President's message to Congress as justly due to the character and spirit of the nation over which he presides, and as directed by sound wisdom and a provident view to the true interests of the country. Resolved that while we hope and believe this declaration will prove a salutary warning to the Confederated sovereigns and deter them from attempting to execute their intention, yet should the event show that this hope is fallacious, we feel a confident assurance that the people of the United States will be prepared to make good the warning and will be convinced that in employing their energy, power, and resources in defeating such machinations and assaults against the independence of their neighbors, they are most effectually securing their own. Resolved that the view with deep solitude and anxious interest the noble and heroic struggle which the Grecians are waging against their relentless and barbarous tyrant, and that we experience a high gratification in believing that he has forever lost his power over them, and that Greece will again remain an independent station among the nations of the earth, which we were read and made the order of the day for Thursday next, Thursday, December 18th, 1823. Mr. Winder's resolutions relative to South America, being the order of the day, were taken up, read the third time, and unanimously assented to.
Sympathy for the Greeks, communicated to the House of Representatives January 2nd, 1824, in the Senate December 19, 1823. Resolved, that the state of South Carolina regards with deep interest the noble and patriotic struggle of the modern Greeks to rescue from the foot of the infidel and the barbarian the hallowed land of Leonidas and Socrates, and would hail with pleasure the recognition by the American government of the independence of Greece. Resolved, that a copy of this resolution be transmitted to our senators and representatives at Washington. Ordered, that the resolutions be sent to the House of Representatives for concurrence by order of the Senate.
This letter is from the Greek Committee of Boston to the President of the United States. Boston, September 29th, 1825. Sir, the undersigned, on behalf of the Greek Committee of Boston, beg leave to represent to you Mr. Jonathan P. Miller of Vermont, repaired to Greece in the summer of 1824 under the patronage of the Greek Committee. Mr. Miller was personally known to one of the committee, Colonel Harris, under whom he had served in the Army of the United States. He brought very advantageous testimonials from gentlemen of the first respectability in Vermont. His appearance and conduct while in Boston previous to his departure were highly exemplary. He has been well received by the Greek government, as the committee perceived by their letters from Prince Mavrocordato, Secretary General. He has received the rank of captain in the Greek service. At the same time, the Greek treasury is low, and it pays nothing in the form of regular wages to those in its employment. The funds of the Greek Committee of Boston, always inconsiderable, have been wholly exhausted in assisting several persons to repair Greece besides Mr. Miller. Considering it, however, highly desirable to furnish this young man with a small $200 per annum, which has himself named as insufficient for his support. It has occurred to the committee that his services might be made so useful to the government of the U.S. as to authorize his receiving that sum as their private agent. The committee are fully aware that no avowed relation could exist between our government and one of its subjects in arms against a power with whom we are at peace. But we suppose at the same time that the employment of confidential agent of the chapter of Captain Miller for the procuring of prompt, authentic information of importance to the public service would carry it in nothing unusual or improper. Excuse me. Should it be necessary that the arrangement should be entirely confidential, it might easily remain even to Mr. Miller himself. Feeling a great interest in securing this little provision for him, we beg leave to express a strong desire that you may feel able and disposed to make it. We are, sir, with the highest respect, your faithful, humble servants. Part 3. This letter is from the Marquis de Lafayette to Henry Clay, meeting for sending military aid to Greece. Lagrange, May 28, 1826. I have already communicated my private observations on the strange and portentous contrast that existed between the liberal sentiments, the improving good sense of the people on this continent, more particularly in France, and the bold but I expect imprudent encroachments of power and priesthood on the actual state of civilization. This anomaly is very striking in the dispositions relative to Greece. It appears that Great Britain and their continental partners have succeeded in tampering with the co-revolutionary movements of the Russians. The British commander of the Ionian Islands has boldly invited the heroic population of Mesologi to surrender to the Turks, which amounts to the massacre of every man, the rape of every woman, and the conversion of Mohammedanism. If not the death of every child prisoner of war in their hands, while a scanty supply to the starving garrison, or at least the starving women and children, was so easy a matter. On the other hand, renegade officers protected by the French government have assisted in reducing that unfortunate population who have resolved to blow up, along with their enemies, such part of themselves as could not fight and devote the other to destruction, among the havoc they made in the barbarian ranks of the Austrians. I shall only say that nothing can exceed or equal the infamy of their conduct. In the meanwhile, the popular feeling in favor of the Grecian cause has never been so warm and so general. Their adversaries are branded with the most pointed reproaches. Collections are going on, supplies are sent. The people of France and ladies of Paris, and successively of every town, are acting a conspicuous and useful part in their behalf. I see in an English paper that some stipulations have been made at St. Petersburg in favor of Greece. But although public opinion is much excited, I question even this dilatory interference. I need not tell you, my dear friend, that I've been anxiously waiting for the arrival of the two private New York frigates and persisting in the opinion that the presence of an American squadron on those seas affords honorable opportunities consistent with the rules of neutrality to render essential services. And indeed, such I have found the popular feeling in the United States. Such is now the general feeling in Europe, that every service rendered to those people would be looked upon with favorable constructions. This letter is from General Colquhoun to Edward Everett, General Headquarters, Peloponnesian Front, Patras, July 5th, 1826. Sir, I have the honor to answer your letters of March 3rd and March 30th, which I am very happy to receive on May 10th. I understand from your first letter, sir, that the philanthropic people of America, sympathizing with the struggle of their Christian brothers in Greece, who are fighting for their liberty, have sent food and clothing on the ship which carried your letters, and they are planning to send more supplies to help us in our need. I am most happy to inform you that the ship has arrived in time, but according to the instruction given by the humanitarian residents of New York, these supplies were to be distributed by your fellow countrymen, Dr. Howe, to the poor, the aged, the widows, and orphans. The supplies benefit us most auspiciously, for they arrived at a time when the destitute people of Greece were on the verge of starvation, deprived of their crust of bread by the daily depredations of their enemy who permits them no agricultural activity and no commerce, so that they must live on grass and the fruits of trees. I would, however, have been more advantageous to our cause had the supplies been distributed among our soldiers, who are engaged in an active warfare or the only defense of the weak. Devoted as they are to the battle alone, they have been totally deprived of food and clothing, and thus for a long time, not have not been able to gather their forces in an attempt to strike at the enemy. All Greece is poor today, and for this reason it would be better if our American benefactors were to direct the committees which are to receive whatever relief supplies may subsequently be sent to Greece, to distribute them at the battle front. For though our weaker citizens, the aged, the widows, the orphans, may be temporarily relieved by such supplies, they will, since their tiny crops have no protection against the enemy, eventually die of starvation, or they will be slaughtered by the Turks anyway, unless there is a well-organized battlefront to prevent it. And so the benefits of your relief are multiplied when it is distributed to the soldiers. In your second letter, you introduce your fellow countryman, Mr. Meredith. Unfortunately, my military duties prevent me from meeting with him for the present, but I shall be most happy to offer my friendliest respects to this person when I do meet him. Even now, my dear sir, Greece considers herself fortunate in partaking of the bounty of her fellow Christians, who extend their sympathy and who support her just war for independence by their relief drives. We are fortunate to have the enlightened virtues of the men who have been chosen to head our government, our fleet, and our army. I refer to the worthy John Capodistria, the noted Lord Cochrane, the Honorable Richard George. We are confident that from their beneficent efforts will emanate the salvation of Greece, and that Greece will last reach her long-awaited independence. The sacred Acropolis of Athens, after 10 months of courageous resistance to its besieger, Cutchin, after having lost so many sacred victims which our nation had offered for its defense, after so many drives by means of which the philanthropists of all Europe have supported, the struggle of those woe were battling both within the sacred precincts and without, has now by a base treaty fallen into the hands of the besieger. The defenders of the sacred hill, both armed and unarmed, transported by French and Austrian warships, have been rescued, and with them have been rescued the firm decision to continue to the last man the battle against the enemies of our faith and our country. On the other hand, Ibrahim chose this opportunity when the entire nation had concentrated its naval and land strength upon the defense of our great Greek metropolis, and when all military measures were being focused upon the Attic battlefront alone. Nor was it possible for us to do more because of our dire lack of means. Ibrahim, I say, chose this opportunity to visit upon the Peloponnese the most frightful depredation. Yet he is not able to carry out his intentions, for the Peloponnesian Greek has already made up his mind to live and die a free man, and he thinks nothing of seeing his own fellow Torrents, of seeing his aged kingfolk, the maidens and the young children in prison or slaughtered, or witnessing the most unprecedented plunder of his property. All these bitter hardships and enemy visits upon him daily, but he resists valiantly, accepting death rather than the dishonor of slavery. And thus, with greater enthusiasm than ever before, and with wholeheartedness, battles against Ibrahim. His battles are good and clear omens that he will deliver to the same fate as Dramali, this Ibrahim himself, and any other force that is sent against him, thus inspiring his own liberty and the rights of all mankind. Philanthropic people of America, the people of Greece are not ungrateful to their benefactors. We are grateful to those who with stentorian voice proclaim our epic struggle. We inscribe their names with ineffable letters upon the chronicles of regenerate Greece, so that they may be delivered to eternity and to the respect of coming generations. Our feelings of human love toward you we voice with the warmest pleasure. Therefore, do not cease the continuance of your relief. Be assured that in supporting our just war, you will achieve the aim of being the only one who sympathized with our undeserved suffering, thus benefiting all mankind, and keeping your consciences clear that you are carrying out the commands of Jesus Christ. You too, great philhellenes, who have such great influence upon your countrymen, you must not cease urging your people to continue their generous drives. You may be sure that Greece will be eternally grateful to you. Do not neglect to write to me whatever external needs you may have that may be useful to my country. And with this request, I proffer you my respects and those of my country, and I remain your trusted friend and servant, commander of the Peloponnesian Front, Theodoros Kolokotronis.
Edward Everett's answer to General Kolokotronis, Washington, House of Representatives, 3rd of March, 1827. General, I have had the honor to receive the letter of last July addressed to me by Your Excellency. I have made it public to the friends of Greece and the American people generally. Our citizens have been deeply affected with sympathy on hearing of the sufferings of our fellow Christians in Greece, and I have the happiness to inform you that they are anxious to contribute to their relief. The law of nations does not permit the government of the United States to render you any warlike aid, but the American people, in their warlike capacity, are eager to afford all the assistance in their power to their brave and suffering fellow men. The vessel which bears this letter is loaded with provisions and clothing, the contribution of benevolent individuals, and it is hoped will bring some relief to the wants of your heroic countrymen. 2 or 3 other vessels will shortly follow from the different parts of the country and will be received, I hope, as a proof that the hearts of the American people are with you. The first cargo is the exclusive offering of the citizens of New York. Wishing to you, General, and to your brave and patriotic countrymen, victory and success, I subscribe myself, your faithful humble servant, Edward Everett. May 5th, 1827. The President of the Third National Assembly at Trezene to the President of the United States. To His Excellency, the President of the United States of North America. Excellency, in extending a helping hand towards the Old World and encouraging it in its march to freedom and civilization, the New World covers itself with increased glory and does honor to humanity. Greece, sir, has received with gratitude the signal testimonies of the philanthropic sentiments of the people of North America, as well as its generous assistance. Commissioned to express to Your Excellency the sincere feelings of my nation, I esteem myself happy in being the organ of communication between free communities which, although separated by space, are, nevertheless, drawn towards one another by the principles of morals and by whatever is truly beneficial to human society. I am, with respect, E. Sissini, President of the Third National Assembly of Greece, N. Spiliadi, Secretary.
And the final correspondence is from Governor Kapodistrias to the President of the United States. Corfu, Turkey, June 15 to 27, 1827. To His Excellency, the President of the United States. Excellency, the President of the General National Congress of my nation has just transmitted to me a letter addressed to Your Excellency in which he expresses the sentiments of gratitude which the liberal conduct of the American nation has filled the nation over which he presides. I deem myself exceedingly happy in having been selected as the organ of this communication, and I pray God, the protector of America and Greece, to afford me in future other opportunities of witnessing the reciprocal sentiments of two nations, to one of whom I belong, and offer to the other the sentiments of my admiration and the homage of my gratitude. I take great pleasure in availing myself in the honor afforded me by this opportunity of presenting to Your Excellency the homage of my own sentiments of profound respect. Your Excellency's most humble and devoted servant, Count Capo d'Astria.